Okay. I guess I should have screen. That's helpful to keep us synchronized. So let's see. Last time we left off in the self macro metavar. And one thing I would say, I don't know if I haven't followed up, but when we said here that we should talk about hygiene integration being out of scope and how appealing the feature might be without that. And what I will note is that that had already been raised in the thread, I think by Boats or someone else. And the answer was a lot less, as we sort of know. I still think it's true. So it's just a question of, does the feature, like, is it even worth it at all, I guess? Or I still think it's true that it's out of scope, I mean.
Yeah, but if it's just some syntactic sugar, it doesn't seem like if someone wanted to implement it, it wouldn't be a huge weight.
Hugely,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be hard to implement probably, but it wouldn't be so hugely compelling. Is that what you're saying? Or?
No, I said it wouldn't be a huge weight. Like it wouldn't be a lot of work for us to.
No.
We might want the syntax for something else, though, hypothetically, right? I mean, is this the most natural thing for this to mean? Maybe it is.
Yeah.
I feel like especially with having $sign crate, now that we have non-$sign crate, it'd be very surprising for $sign self not to mean what this proposes just without the hygiene necessarily.
Right.
Like if it were to be added, it would probably make sense to include $sign super, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just to have
That's
these.
fair enough. Yeah.
2 out of 3 doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that we. I'm not sure that we. I mean, it's still definitely out of scope to do the other hygiene integration. I would love to see somebody willing to champion a group that wants to put macros 2.0 over the finish line. But yeah, just improving the availability of ways to reference items in the current module would make it easier to have macros that are not all at the top level of your crate. So that seems useful to introduce and small.
I feel like this is related to I don't recall whether it was an actual proposal or just a little topic, I think the latter, but Petroshenkov raised the idea of making macro rules kind of regular items in the next edition, I think. So that you could say pub macro, like instead of macro export, you could just say pub macro rules. And
yes, please.
That would kind of fit with this feature, it seems to me. Like just in general.
Presumably, you could also do pub crate macro rules.
Presumably, yeah. I think the main question is around backwards. If you say nothing today, they have a funky meaning, and I don't know whether.
Not exactly today they're visible to the entire crate after the declaration order of the macro, right? Like
yes, I think they don't go outside of your module, but yeah.
Right. I guess yeah. But yeah.
Well, if they don't go outside of your module, then that is very close to what they should work like to, if you introduce pub and pub crate.
Yeah. I have to check. I'm pretty sure they don't, but I'm not sure whether, I don't remember whether Petroshenkov felt like it would be relatively easy to make them behave just like regular items in the next edition, or what. Like there might be a backwards compatibility issue. I don't know. I mean, we'd have to, there obviously is, we'd have to have the right migration for that. That could be a pain. But
I think there's like like even the sugar, like without the hygiene, this is still, I'd be happy to have this feature. Like it's not super
Yeah.
exciting, but like
Yeah, I
macros right
kinda
now
stand
are
by
often
that.
very unreadable because of how they have to type paths and stuff out to the.
Yeah, I think that's how I feel too. So maybe we should propose that. Um,
Yeah, because I feel like this is a case where like the idea of hygiene is so exciting that something that is a perfectly good feature seems like not worth it only because it's being contrasted with hygiene, right? Like,
Someone want to leave a comment proposing to revise the RFC to, I would include dollar super while you're at it. I mean, it's also just useful to be able to get sibling modules. So,
I can make a comment to that effect.
okay.
One thing that's nice about this, I think, is it would make people more likely to be willing to actually put a rooted path instead of just hoping for the best in the prelude or whatever.
Right. Well, I think we'll skip over safer transmute. Because it's not really backlog, kind of out of backlog at this point.
Almost, yeah.
But at least for RFCs, there's another question about tracking issues. But
Yeah, that and not just tracking issues, but I personally think the next item for Backlog Bonanza should be basically, can we go through a list of everything that is currently nightly only and make sure that anything that doesn't have a tracking issue does, and that we actually get everything onto the board of like, is this perma unstable? Is this on a path to stable? It'd be nice to actually have an entry for macros 2.0 and have an entry for niche optimization and every random language feature we should be tracking. That's a backlog. That's probably the biggest bit of backlog that it seems like we haven't worked on.
yeah, that's kind of where that's sort of what I meant by tracking issues, but that's a good concrete starting point of how to address them. I guess let's get through these RFCs, even though they're not exactly backlogged. So target configuration. This is pretty new, I guess, about a month old. Looks like it adds a new CFG target. Seems potentially useful. I don't know. Any thoughts? I'm looking how much commentary there is.
Well, the cargo CFG target bit is something that I think the cargo team can address. The is this labeled T cargo as well?
No, but
It should probably, that part should be labeled T cargo.
Yeah.
But as for the new target, I mean, we have this would be effectively the introduction of a new tier 3 target, right?
Wait, what?
I don't think so. No, it's just proposing adding syntax to match on all parts of the target triple at
Oh.
the same time.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry, I misread this. Which matches the entire target triple string. Yes. No, that seems perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, so being able to do this basically.
Yes, I did see this one before. Yeah, that seems perfectly reasonable.
I don't see how it's any different than, like, we already have options for matching on parts of the target string, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm surprised you already have this.
Right. I would be inclined to just merge this. Personally.
Yeah. Likewise.
Almost doesn't require an RFC, but since it's there.
I also suspect, though I'm not proposing that we do so in this, that there would be value in having the ability to wildcard.
Yes.
I feel
At
like
that
you do
point,
that,
don't you want the individual ones though?
right? You already have the individual one, so you can just
You do have
all-
the individual ones. I'm just more suggesting if we already have this syntax, we're relatively close, and the shorthand would potentially be helpful. It's kind of easier to see at a glance, this is what I'm matching versus, okay, which one is OS and which one is vendor again?
But I think my only fear with that is that I tried to once write a parser for target triples and discovered that there's no actual standardization, and you have to just look up from a list of.
No, there definitely isn't. Yes,
So I'm worried
it would
about like
literally be at like wildcards.
What the star refers to, right? Like if like because many target triples have 4 elements, right? And if you like put it in a certain place, like x86 star Linux or what, like Linux star, like it seems like that kind of issue seems actually like it ends up being quite complicated because of how
Sure.
like messed up the
Yeah.
format.
Yeah, I'm not proposing that we do that in this issue. It's more I could imagine somebody wanting to propose that and a corresponding syntax to go with it. But yeah, that doesn't affect this, which we should just merge.
Okay. Yes. Agreed. Do we want to cargo? I don't know whether they feel the need to be actually checking their boxes, but we should certainly give them the opportunity to do so, I guess.
I mean, I can't imagine like
Sort of
like the way it works. If we have a CFG, then cargo does too. Like it's.
Yeah,
we
I feel like as a member of my team, I would not want. If libs were adding something like this, I would not want to check my box on it because it'd be too trivial. But
Yeah.
I would appreciate the heads up. That's all I.
Yeah, I think
but I think one of you aren't Josh. Or some of you are on the cargo team. Maybe you can raise it. Who will do this? I propose. I need like a volunteer spinner.
I'll do it.
All right. Yay. Okay, last one. Plan to make. Oh, this is a good one to talk about. This brings up another topic.
You skipped the target ABI RFC, I think.
Wait. Oh, I thought that was the same thing. Okay.
No, it's a little different.
Yeah, I see that now.
Is this the one about trying to address FreeBSD, or is that a different one?
It looks like this is basically pulling off the last little bit of the target triple, like hard float or whatever, as a separate target underscore thing.
Do we not? So currently we expose OS and vendor, but not the final section. Is that it?
We do actually introduce the final section. This appears to be, yeah, this is splitting the final section, which is often used to like embed stuff. I think the reference level explanation at the bottom here, GNU EAB IHF.
Yeah.
Right now we provide target inf, and we don't provide the EAB IHF bit, or rather not in a very clean way.
Would this be changing? Like if we provide target env already, the way this is written, it sounds like it. Or do we not provide? Do we just provide GNU already, or do we provide GNU EAI?
That's an excellent question. It sounds like they're implying that GNU EAB IHF currently defines target env as GNU rather than GNU EAB IHF. If that's the case, then this would not be a breaking change. It would just introduce the ability to get at the EAB IHF bit.
Right.
So I think this is the stuff that makes me was why I was talking about target triples being a mess, right? Like,
yeah.
Yes, and there's no like standard rule to extract out this ABI. It just kind of.
yeah.
You just have to have it in a table. Yeah, that's fair.
Nonetheless, I don't know. Seems useful.
Yeah, I would be
Yeah.
inclined to support this one, and the only open question I would ask is this changing the value of target in for any existing target? Like, do those targets do GNU EABIHF, or do they do GNU? If this would not be changing target in, then it's backward compatible, and yeah, by all means, let's make this available. And if it would be backward incompatible, then we need to be more careful here. Either
So
way, I think we should let this move forward.
one thing I will note, like votes, you pointed out how challenging they are to parse, and I totally agree. But this actually doesn't require parsing, right? It just requires a table.
No, it's just
A human can do it.
Uh,
Not so hard. But,
yeah. Is there like a standard understanding of the set of ABIs and
right.
the difference between an ABI and an environment, and like, is there a table of these things that is then everyone agrees? Like, no one will be surprised by how RCFG works based on it, you know?
Yeah, so I guess the only question is like, how standard is this convention or whatever elsewhere?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we would say we do not wish to change existing behavior, but are generally positive. This is how I feel, so people can disagree, but on offering this config, presuming it's standard and backwards compatible.
I can write a comment to that effect.
Okay. Now we can go to plan to make core instance panic identical. Which brings up another question of just general addition monitoring and planning. So what this is about is the question of, we introduced this RFC that lets you do things like this in order to print the value of X. But the problem is panic has special casing, and the core and stood panic behave differently. Are people familiar with this general equation? Should I enumerate it? Okay. And so this RFC proposes a kind of plan. I think is based on the addition and introduces a function. I have to look, I guess. I think it introduces a function for, let's see. There's
For
the,
unformatted panic.
yeah,
It doesn't need a macro.
right. So panic any to send arbitrary payloads. And then everything else just work. And that requires a certain amount of migration.
Presumably, this could be, the warn could have a Rust fix, right?
Yes, I think there shouldn't be any major challenge.
Right.
And it sounds like Clippy already has a lint that is close. I don't know the details. Personally, I'm in favor of this because I feel like this is what I would expect behavior to be. Like if we had given the feature, but the alternative would be to, well, I don't know what the alternatives are. You can kind of leave it as it is. You can introduce new.
I could answer any questions if you want to. I wrote this thing, so.
Oh, hey, didn't know
Hey.
you were. Oh yeah, there you are.
Great. Yeah.
Go ahead. Feel free to correct me or answer questions.
Yeah, I think you already introduced the thing pretty well, but there's a lot of different tiny problems, but the biggest problem it is fixing is indeed the implicit arguments that you mentioned. But while fixing that, it also fixes a number of other problems, but the result is basically just making the panic macro trivial again. It's just that the current version is, yeah, has this weird special case that will unfortunately break things if we would just fix them right away. So it's mostly just warnings and adding a function. So I guess decisions here are more like, is it fine to move it to a function? And do we really need to avoid all these breakages? But considering the amount of things that break while I tried to do a creator run or some other things, I think we really cannot break things in the current edition.
How many, do you have a sense for how many, like, I guess that answer is a reasonable number are affected or something.
So almost everything in this RFC is already implemented. Like almost every step has a link to the pull request that implements it.
Okay. But I meant, like, you said you did a creator run with.
I want to do a creator run, but even the try already failed because there were things depending on it.
Okay.
So while doing the try build before the creator run, the club already failed because it uses not a string literal for some panics in assert. So it really seems like we cannot really break it other than over an addition.
Is this a mechanism for changing the panic to use the prelude? How do we change the behavior of the macro in the new edition?
So for panic right now is a macro rules macro, so that wouldn't work, but it would have to be a built-in macro, just like assert, and then it can just check the span of the word panic, just like assert is already a built-in macro. Panic will also have to be that, and that's for core panic, and CD panic would just be an alias for that.
What?
So SCD panic would just be use core panic. It would no longer be a separate macro.
Okay, be a wrapper around it or something.
Seems reasonable.
Wasn't this also the issue that was blocking like inline format strings where they have the variable
Yes.
inline instead of having afterwards?
That's the motivation, is to unlock that change.
Yeah, this will unlock.
I think is a pretty major ergonomic win, in my opinion. Like,
I think
Yeah.
that's not the only motivation. It's definitely what led us to discover this. But once we discovered it, it turns out that this is an issue for like some of the inconsistencies here between core and std were problems for folks who work on crates that sometimes use no std and sometimes don't.
Yeah, it seems bad that core panic, like in general, they should, no APIs between core and std that are the same path should be different. Right?
Yeah, so in the RFC, I mentioned 9 different problems, and only one of them is the implicit arguments thing.
yeah,
I
these
guess
are
it
all-
is the biggest motivation, number 8. But the
I
other
want to make sure I
problem-
understand something here. I'm trying to understand the solution in terms of there's one specific corner case. There's a corner case that I can't imagine anyone actually does, but I want to at least raise it, which is when someone is currently using panic with a literal string that has a template macro, like it has a template form in it, but it's just passing it as a literal string, right? That code has behavior today.
Yes.
And it would we would reinterpret it tomorrow, right? Or is it, because I'm trying to understand what the situation is.
That would be that if you look at the third step in the proposed solution, that adds a lint for it. Can you click on the screenshot there? Yeah, in the third sentence in the third paragraph, there's a screenshot link.
But what if you have a template string that has a variable in it? Like, how can you tell the difference between a deliberate use of the feature versus someone who had a string that happened to match the feature?
Yeah, so
the migration.
the screenshot, you see that the lint gives 2 suggestions. It says like, hey, if you meant this, do that, and otherwise, so it just shows both options.
So, and to the point, Felix, isn't that the reason to use an addition?
But I thought we were going to change the behavior in 2015, 2018 as well.
No, that would just break too many things. There's a
Oh, okay.
lot
I
of
must
cases
have
around.
misunderstood the later bullets then about how. Okay, so we'll keep all the old. Okay, all right. Sorry.
Yes.
So we are.
We're going to
keeping
lint
the
on
semantics.
2015, 2018,
Yes.
but we're not going
Okay.
to break them.
Okay, thank you. That does help clarify that. I was trying to understand the business at the end about unifying the code for 2015, 2018.
There's
But I
one
didn't
thing
realize. Okay.
There's one thing this would break in the current edition, and that is the macros like to do and implemented assert. They currently call panic without any path, so just panic by itself, because they don't know if they need to call stud panic or core panic. And that means you can, if you define your own panic macro, it will call that one instead, because there's no hygiene. That shouldn't have happened, but that can now be fixed. There is already an open pull request for them, because at least for those situations, stud panic and core panic now behave the same. But it does mean that if anyone relies on the fact that they can intercept it with their own macro, that wouldn't work anymore. But it was never promised, and it wasn't supposed to work that way.
So I see. So you're saying to do today invokes panic.
Yeah,
which
just panic.
could be a user given macro
Exactly.
that is shadowing the built-in one. Got it. That feels like a bug fix, though.
Yeah, to me too. But it's the one thing that really changes behavior. Otherwise, everything is just for the next edition.
Do you, given all how much of this is already implemented, like, are you happy to pursue the implementation of this proposal?
Yeah, definitely. I have most of it ready. One of these things were done by someone else, but the lint in here I have implemented. The second version is not yet sent as a pull request, but I have a working version of that, I think. So it's all just waiting for a decision, like, do we actually want this? Do we want a lint that actually does say, hey, this is going to happen in the next edition?
Yeah. Is there one other question, I guess, for the room is this our call, or is this libs, or both? But I guess the two questions: is this libs, and is there anyone who doesn't approve? Maybe I should ask it more affirmatively, but who would be in favor of like moving to merge this RFC? And of course, that would still give time for rumination.
Definitely in favor.
Yeah, I like
favor.
the consistency improvements.
There's just one thing left to bike shed, and that's the name of the function panic any. There were suggestions for panic box, panic with value, panic throwing, throw, panic unwind, start unwind, and a lot of others.
I vote we make that lib's problem.
Yeah, I think
First of all, I agree with that statement, that, and not in a joking way, like this is fundamentally a lib's decision what that function is called. But also, I think that the situation isn't quite as bad as you're describing, because for two reasons. I think there was a very compelling argument in the thread that all of the with names are confusingly similar to things that take a closure, because with is a common like syntax that we use to mean this takes a closure, and all of the throw related syntaxes would be entirely too confusingly similar to things that we've talked about using as like a companion with try. So the idea of making throw using exception syntax like throw might make people think, oh, this is Rust's exception syntax. I want to use this for exceptions. No, this is a very obscure panic feature that most people don't use. That seems like it would be an attractive nuisance that will trap people into thinking, oh, I should be using this. So both of those families of things seem like they'd be hazardous, which just leaves you with a couple of possibilities left that have panic in the name. So either panic any or maybe start unwind, but I kind of agree with somebody's comment that start unwind presumes that panics use unwinding.
Yeah, I was going to say,
There's one more data point that's not in the thread. The error handling group was talking about the possibility of specializing this function or something inside this function for specifically for things that implement error, such that you can still just panic on error object itself and still get the error chain out of it. So if that is something that's going to happen, then maybe that's something to take into account for the name. But I don't know if that's feasible or if that's going to happen.
I think so. I'm in favor. I would check my box on a merge, but I also think that maybe libs should be tagged, or like the changes to panic go through libs. And for the, I also think this is the name of a libs thing. One that wasn't suggested was calling core panic, and just having it be called panic the function. But
yeah, I definitely think it is, or at least both. So
Yeah, I suppose we have write the method and write the macro. So
yeah, it's normal to have like functions at the same name as macros. It's not going to be ever in the prelude or anything, this function, so it's not like it's going to.
Who wants to follow up? And what follow up? Sounds like we're gonna tag tlibs and propose merge. Or do we want to remove ourselves, I guess? That's the other option.
I think aren't we in this somehow?
I feel like we are.
addition changes somehow.
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of at that intersection, so.
Between the addition change and the fact that panic unwinding semantics are kind of part of the language. But I think that we should stay included in this, but it sounds like everybody's willing to check off on it.
Right. Okay, what's going on with my mouse here?
Would it make sense, rather than having like one mega RFC that is both libs and lang, and we all need to check our boxes, to do a RFC bot for just lang, and then libs can deal with the separate question of what do we call the function and similar?
I think splitting it
Or
is
should
more
we just?
than it's
And
worth.
Yeah, that's fair.
I
But
expect
also
this to
just
be
merge it and then
uncontroversial.
leave the bike fitting to the tracking issue of that function.
Fair point. Fair point.
Too confusing.
Most of the libs naming things happen after the unstable version is already merged, only on the stabilization PR.
All right, I'm gonna take the point of making this comment, unless someone else wants to. Just to move us along. And that's the end of our list of RFCs.
Yay.
Woohoo. I think we do have something I plan to do after this meeting is to go back over, because I know that we acted on all the things we said we would do.
Yeah, we definitely deferred some of them, especially towards the beginning. Towards the end, we tend to just like, okay, who's going to write the comment? Let's write the comment. But towards the beginning, we're like, here's our conclusion, and then nobody wrote the comment.
Yeah, I think partly because we didn't know quite what we were doing. But maybe we can discuss a little bit what to go from here. So we had talked about, let's see, I want to write this next steps here. We had talked about tracking issues, and Josh, you had a specific proposal I'm trying to bring back to memory.
I was proposing concretely that every nightly only feature should have a corresponding tracking issue and ought to be on a board somewhere in a category for like permanently unstable, and there should be a good reason for it, on some path to stable, needs somebody to pick it up, maybe make part of this our wish list for like, hey, would a project group like to come help stabilize this? What will it take to stabilize this? How do we get this over the finish line? Let's reduce the number of things that are just languishing in nightly with nobody to drag them over the finish line.
Yeah, that's kind of what I had in mind. I would like to be able to say, I'm not quite sure what the buckets are, but I'd definitely like to be able to answer when people say either what is needed to move this along and sort of will this move, which in some cases what is needed to move might be, sorry, it's not moving right now because.
But maybe nobody's decided that, and we should actually finally disposition it. Maybe give it a name that starts with rustc underscore if it's going to be one of those like only stid uses this. But also there's a decent chunk of things that are, only stid uses this where we should consider, should it be that way? Should there be a way to move this towards stable? Each one of those needs a little consideration.
But one other thought is that there are some features like Rust call ABI that are basically blocked on, like that's blocked on variadic generics, I would say. And maybe we can catalog
Right.
some.
If we built a tree of that, of like, this is a, here's the blocker for this, that would be fine. Also, that would be a good hint of things that we're currently not tracking that also need proposals, like someone should solve variadic generics. We have a long wish list, but I think step one of that wish list is what things do we need to unblock other things?
Yeah.
And a bunch of those things are also waiting on implementation details as well, as I recall.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, that's my understanding for macros 2.0 hygiene is that like a quarter of it is let's make sure we have the right semantics, and 3/4 of it is somebody has to sit down and implement this.
Well, and I've lost track of which things are waiting on Chalk or Polonius or something as well. That we don't
For
want to take
example, yes.
more changes to trait system things until we have the new trait system or something.
So
Right.
yeah. I don't think we should start in on this right now. Are there any other proposals for what else we could use, like do with this backlog besides tracking issues?
Well, the other will be going back through all of the items that we dispositioned and actually dispositioning them, whether it's close, merge, postpone, like acting on anything that hasn't been acted on.
That seems more like, I guess the question is, maybe we should just do that right now and assign people basically.
So
Sure.
I did have another sort of next step potentially, other than tracking issues, which is sort of backloggy, is that there's sort of a lot of, or at least what feels like a lot of issues on Rustling Rust, which are not really tracking, and they're like sort of feature requests, and sort of there's this weird trait system thing that someone wanted to do, and it's unclear whether it's a bug or is actually intended behavior, and to some extent like it needs almost a lane team decision of like, yes, this is intended, or no, what you're doing here is actually sort of intentionally not working.
Are those tagged with like appropriate metadata that we'd be able to actually identify them relatively easily?
Most of them are T-Lang, and some of them are C feature requested or so. I think if there was a goal of working through them, I think that we could get most of them tagged. That is sort of the low order there, more so just like actually dedicating lane team time to working through them, if that's something lane team wants to do.
It does seem useful. I'm not sure if it's, I feel like I would put it somewhat lower in priority than working through tracking.
I would agree there. Yeah, I think it's more so like, if we wanted to do something like that, it would be useful to know at least like a month ahead of time, so that like I or someone else could work through them, make sure they're tagged, sort of prepare maybe quick summaries, something like that.
Okay. I feel like it's going to take us a while to get through the tracking issues.
Sure.
Probably not a month out for that. But yeah, the other thing that's on my mind is how we're going to but I don't think it's a backlog issue of tracking the additions and so on. Maybe the answer to that is we should have a bit of a planning meeting, but yeah. All right. Okay. Then I'm gonna let's go look back a little bit and see what we've got here. So for this target extension RFC, we had proposed that it should be, maybe I should just go off. I don't know if this is a good use of group time, because some of this may have been done, some not. I don't know what folks think about that, but looks like this wasn't done though. We were going to propose that this should start with implementation. I guess let me ask this question. Does anyone want to go through and follow up on these things?
The other
I'm happy
option
to
would
help
be
with some of them.
distribute the work right now amongst people willing to do it versus doing it synchronously.
Why don't we do this? Let's end this call, but folks who want to do some of the work, I will make a little list and write people's names, and we can check them off asynchronously.
We'll just talk about it on Zulip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
All up there. You can put your names in here also, if you have the doc. But we'll follow up on Zulip. But let's distribute the work. But it seems silly to do it live. Thanks everybody. This was awesome. And we made it through all the RFCs.
Bye.